I'm very pleased to be here at this conference and hope to revise the paper and hopefully get it included in the publication or some other outlet. We know there's a long history of political art in general. We know there's a long history of Latino political art, and we know there's a big resurgence of it in the 1960s that has continued to the present in different forms and different ways. They had particular kinds of issues that artists were addressing, and many artists themselves were activists themselves and also artists, or artists and also activists, and we're collectively with communities of interest and organizations in the struggle to improve the situation of Latinos in the United States. And we're talking about Latinos, we're talking about Puerto Ricans, we're talking about Dominicanos, we're talking about Chicanos in various regions of our country. I prepared a PowerPoint, so that I'll share that PowerPoint with you very quickly, and we'll come back to some things that some of the artists want to talk about, any things in the images. So in the paper, it basically lays out a foundation by which the history of political art and Latinos involved in political art, not a complete history, just examples really. And then it goes to Sherazade and Nitza's work, which is more current as opposed to the past. Gets into a focus on partisan art, artists who work across, focusing on Democrats or attacking Republicans or whichever way they go, but it's very political and partisan in that sense. I show some examples of art and images that have had profound impact in the entire world. We're talking about Vietnam, the napalm bombing. We're talking like the situation in Mexico during the Olympics, when the guys were out there. That's an image everybody remembers, and others of that sort, because it just shows the power that images can have in a very broad way too. Then I focus on Malaquias Montoya, an artist that I work very closely with, and showed some of his work over a period of time, and mentioned the Counter Archives, which is an exhibit that Tatiana Reynosa had organized, curated, that we have up right now. I'm going to just show them. And she, through the assistant from the National Association of Latino Arts, they published a catalog for the exhibit. It's up at Notre Dame right now. We're not going to cover that per se, but I wanted to just mention that we had that exhibit up right now, and there's a really wonderful catalog, and you can talk to Tatiana about that work too, and I hope that she presents here on campus to tell you more about this work. It'll travel later too. I turned then to cartoon art and really focus on one artist, Eric Garcia, who's from New Mexico, and ended up going to Chicago, works at the National Museum of Mexican Art, and so he mixes artwork and graphics together to communicate, very focused on voting. So I just selected works that address voting issues. I think they're very effective. And then the last part really is a call to action, getting artists interested and getting art collectives that we work with over the years to work together again to consider producing at 12 print studios throughout the country under the auspices maybe of Consejo Gráfico to begin a project that addresses issues in the political arena, not necessarily from a partisan standpoint, but just address issues from a Latino perspective or Latino perspectives. And if this work migrates out and goes into the partisan world, that's independent of us. But just to get these images up and out and mass produced in posters as well, so the original prints, and then for exhibition and public discussion, and then there'll be a production of 10,000 prints, posters that would be distributed in 500 locations throughout the country, and working with community-based organizations to help get these images, these posters, into areas where hard to reach people, areas that are hard to reach, to get in English and Spanish perhaps, or depending on what sector we're focusing on, what segment of the population, to get these images in barbershops and bars and in the community. This is where the mass media often misses. And these images by themselves may not get people to the voting booth, but collectively, with working with nonprofit organizations and others who are doing this, it might add another factor that ultimately will get people not only to register, but to actually to get a vote and get some more discussion and more anger in our community for the attacks on our community that we're seeing happen, the disenfranchisement in terms of the voting issues. I think somebody pointed out there were like 140 some legislative pieces that got passed in different states and different arenas, limiting voting. This is all recent. That's major. That's not a small thing. And so then it calls for action on that end of it. So that's where that ends in the paper. So let me just go real quickly. I don't know if I'm taking too much time, but I'm going to just try to march through if I can. And before I do that, I already forgot the main thing I was going to do is introduce the panel. So I've got Tomás Iván Frausto, Olega.
Just by name, I think it'll be quicker.
He's retired, program officer, Ford Foundation.
Don't say anything, just give us our name because we can.
Lisa Tufino, artist, New York, Taya Boricua. She was born in Mexico. She's Puerto Rican.
Mexican.
And a great colleague and friend, Amelia Malagamba.
Mejor conocida como Amelia Malapata.
Mal hablada.
También.
From Mexico, we worked together with the Colegio de la Frontera Norte. She ended up coming to UT Austin, got her PhD, art historian, is now teaching at UT San Antonio. And then our last but not least is Sherazade Garcia, Dominicana, lives in Brooklyn, fantastic artist. Both Nitsa and Sherazade in our collection. She has tremendous exhibitions that are going on right now as we speak, and she just showed me some catalogs. So again, I'm very grateful that Nitsa's here. This is all part of a working group, in part funded by the Inter-University Program for Latino Research. It's kind of a loose working group. We just kind of get together and present and work together on various topics. So with that, let me, okay. So again, this is just a brief review of some early images. I'm not going to get into the discussion of these. There's just not time. So this is going to be a dialogue from the panel here that we'll talk about. Yolanda Lopez. This is just not a Latino. This goes presidential election that had a big impact. I don't really know a whole lot about that, but I just use this as an example of an image that's recognized in art history and in terms of impact. And this is some more recent kinds of issues where people are using imagery to make a statement. And of course, you remember this image here. I was in Vietnam. My wife and I were visiting last March and went to the museum there. It's really incredible. This is this woman. She survived. I didn't know that until I started looking this up, and that's her now. Very severely injured, but managed to survive it. And then here, again, speaking to community, trying to get the community to address issues, deportations, some of Nitsa's work that we showed at Taya Boricua. She can talk about her work too. This is a really beautiful work that we had an opportunity to see. And then we moved to Sherazade Garcia, who's, again, really looking at the questions of migration, settlement, communities, the links between country of origin and the communities in New York and other places, the dangers of travel, etc. And I'm going to fast forward on this. This is a beautiful image. This image Sonia Sotomayor has. She's collected her work. It's a great connection that she has with Sonia.
Beautiful.
You have to see the new catalog. So images that deal with voting in the past. Again, making claims to the community to fight for your rights. Again, these things are not by themselves. They go in collective action. They go with community-based organizations, mobilizing, getting people conscious about issues, getting them to act on behalf of the community, and sometimes doing action. And then other kinds of pushes for voting in English and Spanish. Conferences and different kinds of events, trying to do just like here. And then this is the partisan work. This is something I just downloaded from the web. very recent. And then stuff about Obama, about President Bush, Bernie Sanders, an artist from Los Angeles. And then again, images that carried, that people see and have seen repeatedly. And then into Malaquias Montoya. Again, the paper addresses this in more detail. So I'm just going through very quickly here. Some early work on the war in Vietnam and supporting farm workers. Very classic work, documented Palestine, the Baki issue, deportations. These are over decades, the death penalty and others. He both does in-your-face art as well as affirming culture. So it's really attacking and also affirming. And then Adriana Corral and and Alma Leiva in terms of the exhibit that was shown at Notre Dame. And then into the cartoon art by Eric Garcia. I just flashed these to show you. Again, these are very specific to voting. So these are just different examples of artists who are working and addressing these kinds of issues using different kinds of formats. And again, addressing the Latino vote and barriers to voting too.
Machete Illustrated.
The creation of this work, too, is something that circulates, not just by them producing it and putting up with posters, but also entering social media. And the nice thing about posters, you can see them often. You don't just see them one time like a TV ad. It might appear a few times. This is something that can be constantly seen, and people can start reflecting on it and discussing issues. And then this is specific to kind of Latino issues, too, here. Or Latino content. These are all recent, obviously.
Nope.
The last one my wife gave me, she was in Lubbock, Texas, and picked this up last week. And then we here has artists who are now forming collectives in Puerto Rico, in New York, in Los Angeles, in Chicago, who are wanting to address the political arena right now. This is all recent. And they're creating organizations to do this and getting artists together to work together. And here's some examples of that. And then out in the streets, protesting the SNL. And then Nisa, I put this down because she a long time addressed this. She has a long history, and I just wanted to show you some of the kind of concerns that she had and how she presented this. And this is only a selection of a PowerPoint that she created for that purpose. Antonio, Southwest voter registration.
The jalapeño challenge.
So that's it there. So really, now the issue of political art. How do we impact a large community of interest that has so many different segments, a very heterogeneous population that's not just in the Southwest, it's not just Chicano, it's multi-ethnic in many communities. How do you reach down? How do you reach to specific audiences and target them and communicate messages that become effective? How can community activists use these things to enhance the position of Latinos in our country? And it's not just like a quick step from the bottom to the top. You've got to go through various levels of communication and activities to get people engaged, get them aware of their interests, and get them to move on their interests. Collectively in particular. So with that, I'm going to ask Tomas to take the...
Well, I always think that it's important to set a context, so I want to pass this out. And then just quickly go through it and then talk through some of the language. Many of you remember this, and those of us that, whether you're active in the political arena or in the cultural arena or the artistic arena, this I think will have resonance. It's just a thing to remind us of how this all began, sort of like un viaje a la semilla. So I'll read it just as a point of departure, como un punto de partida. Esteban Villa, an artist from Sacramento, captures the spirit of the time. We're talking about the Chicano civil rights movement and how that inspired a whole sort of cultural enterprise among Latinos throughout the United States. And he was working with this Mala Efe group, the Mexican American Liberation Front, in San Francisco. And this is what he says. Esto fue por eso del año 68. Entre los miembros del grupo figuraban los artistas Manuel Enríquez, René Yáñez y Esteban Villa. Era la época del Great Boycott y del Third World Strike in Berkeley. We would meet regularly at Esteban Villa's house to discuss the role and function of the artists in el movimiento. At first, our group was composed mainly of painters, and we would bring our work and criticize it. Discussions were heated, especially the polemics of the form and content of revolutionary art and the relevance of murals and graphic art. Posters and other forms of graphics were especially discussed since many of us were creating cartelones as organizing tools for the various Chicano mitotes in the Bay Area. Our group kept growing, and soon it included local poets and intellectuals like Octavio Romano. In March of 1968, we decided to hold an exhibition in the big old frame house on 24th Street here in Oakland. The spacious but slightly rascuache house had been christened La Causa. The exhibition was called Nuevos Símbolos por la Raza Nueva, La Nueva Raza, and attempted to visually project images of El Hombre Nuevo, the Chicano who had emerged from the decolonization process. Opening night was a todo dar, with viejitos, guainitos, and vatos de la calle walking in, checking it out, and staying on to rap. Algunos poetas locales read their work, and there was music and plática muy sabrosa. We all sensed the beginning of an artistic rebirth, un nuevo arte del pueblo. And I mention this because in here, in the very quick paragraphs, you see the kind of where this all came from. It was a community-based art that involved not only visual artists, but poets and intellectuals, and that they were really discussing, what is the form and content of art that will engage the people. Remember, the lemma for that period was a question of sort of self-empowerment, self-determination, we called it in those days. But I just thought that this gives you an idea of how this massive movement of people organized themselves, but very quickly, immediately, how art was very central to the different political fronts. So each political front, whether you're working on health or voting registration or police brutality, each of the fronts had artists that were trying to symbolically project those ideas in visual art. And the posters became very important because they were easy to project, and because we have a tradition. And I'll stop here, but the three things I want to talk about. This artistic movement has been historically very rooted in our communities from the bottom up. This is a movement that did not begin from the museum circuit. It began with the populace in the community deciding, but it has a long historical trajectory. And I just want to mention things that you might already know just to begin the conversation. One is, for example, that the Mexican mural movement of the 1920s and 30s after the Mexican Revolution was really impactful throughout the world. In the United States, the WPA movement was really based on a Mexican form, the forms of the Mexican mural movement. The graphic arts of way back in the Mexican graphic arts like Posada and the Taller de Gráfica Popular became the hallmarks for the American mural movement that then expanded to Puerto Rico and to the Caribbean and so on. So that this is a very rooted tradition in our community, art that speaks to the concerns and problems and dreams of the community in forms that are accessible to the community. Secondly, that this art form in our communities was not only visual, but it was also oral. we all remember, at least I remember, when, you know, the poorest home in our communities has calendarios, you know. The businesses put out calendarios, they used to, and still do, every year with pictures. And then at the end of the year, my mom would save them and cut out the picture and put it on the wall. And so you'd go by as a 7-year-old in San Antonio. I saw this guy with a lot of plumes holding a woman, you know, like here, and she was swayed. And so I said, Mom, ¿quién es? And she would then tell the story orally. Es Popocatépetl Ixtaccíhuatl. Allá, and she would tell a story. En México eran dos jóvenes que estaban enamorados, and she would tell a story. You know, or if you saw the Virgen de Guadalupe in a calendar, you would ask, and they would say, oh, esto es muy importante, and then they would tell a story. Allá, en tiempos muy antiguos, se apareció una señora a un pobre indito, hablándole en su propio idioma. So we got, in a very quotidian, everyday sense, a lesson in history and a lesson in art. So that's what all these artists that you saw are translating, that historical meaning verbally and orally. And the other thing that is very important is that everything sort of has cycles. So that at the very beginning, you know, the visual artists were tied in with the word and actually with action in the community, like a mercado, you know. La voz pasa por la gente que está hablando y pasan un panfleto y ahí en el panfleto dicen, levántense pueblo, you know, manifestos, you know, that a lot of the artists wrote. I'll stop here, but just the 3 points I wanted you to make was, this is an art that is rooted in the community. It has a long history within the community, and many of the ideas and the ideals of this art are still being continued today with all the Latino groups throughout the country on current events, whether it's Ferguson or whether it's the Dreamers or whether it's, you know, women's or political women's action groups or health or whatever. Y las cosas cambian, pero no cambian. Entonces, la cultura y el arte siempre ha sido fundamental para la expresión política in our communities. We'll start from there.
Wonderful.
I think we can just maybe, who wants to go next? I just,
Yeah.
You want to go next? or should I
Well,
go?
if you don't mind, in our way here, Tomas and I, we had a wonderful conversation on the topic. And one of the things that I was telling him is that it is kind of conflicting for me to speak about political art in the voting rights, for example, and thank God that we cover other areas. Because I think that political art is, in many ways, is most of what the artists in our communities do, just because they speak from, and their experience comes from a particular status in the United States, and they speak from their own experience, and that makes them, in what they do, political in nature. One thing that I want to recover from what Tomas just said is that that artists, how do you engage or invite artists to participate in a project for promotion of the voting, as we see what is happening in the United States? I don't think that that's difficult, but how is the artist conscious of what are the audiences that he or she needs to address within community? And like Tomás said, todo cambia pero no cambia. And somebody was, Maria Leon was telling us, and this figure just shake me all over. She said that every 40 seconds, somebody from our Latino communities turns 18. Every 40 seconds. So here we are not talking about los viejitos como nosotros. We really have to start thinking. Yeah, we really start thinking about the generations that are coming up. And so how is the visual artist that comes from the graphic poster making tradition use that tradition and that technique in ways that can really engage the youth. For me, that's a critical thing. I have students right now working with freshmen, believe it or not, which is kind of a really good education for me. And most of the information that they get, most of the things that they pay attention to come from the social media and from virtual spaces. It is very rare that you can ask a student to see what is, did you see that photograph in the room? Say, what? They are like here. They are like here. They are like here. They don't see each other. They don't navigate physically, looking at the colors, so how is it that the artists, and I think that's the big challenge when we think about engaging political artists or political work for our communities with the young people. What are the possibilities that are out there that the artists can make use of? And the other thing is that we are very ingenious community. We were in our way here, we were talking about La Piñata de Trump.
Yes.
You know, and La Piñata de Trump comes from the vernacular, comes from the popular culture of our communities. It is immediately a response, immediate. It didn't wait. The next day, there was
Was there.
piñata right there. So,
And everybody
rómpele
wanted.
la jeta. And so,
Yeah.
and so this ingenuity and how to integrate it into action really is not only the artistic creation, but the reading, the understanding and the engaging through that art these young people. And one thing that I don't want to keep talking because I don't want to take time away from everybody, but I got an invitation from these people that is called Voto 2016 Election App. And let me read what it says. We will create a mobile app, and they are asking for money, of course, to encourage Latinos to register and vote and engage with the 2016 presidential election. Millions of young Latinos can vote for the first time in 2016 and could influence the election's outcome. We are bringing together public service, journalism, and technology to help them make their voices heard on election day. And at the time that I print out this, they were already collecting $18,580 from people in the virtual space. And so when you think about apps, you know, you download them, and how can an artist that comes from the graphic tradition engage what he or she produces into this new way of circulating the message and the image? So that's a question.
I wanna say something. I was having this wonderful conversation with also with Nitza. This is the good thing about when you have to get together and then we have like a conference before the conference.
Yeah.
Like the party after the party. And I have to say one thing that I find interesting is like the more we get involved and the more we are more mature, we see not only the diversity that we have here of like, we come from here, we Latin Americans, we are from USA, but we are diverse in all the things we bring because we come from different places. But also the different practices of activism. So, also artists, you know, then there is something about this artist thing of like isolation. Let me go to my studio, believe for my thing, you know, do my thing, and then let's see what happens with each other. There is a part of me that likes that because it's comfortable. But there's another one that makes me feel that I am missing so much. And so since I don't like to be comfortable, I get involved with this idea of like how engage that new generation. And this has been the most wonderful thing. I think that was my best decision ever. And like Don Tomas said about like this storytelling and how you, by conversations, you have these art history lessons, very sabrosas, because without the boring thing of being like the day, this and that, you know, but also without knowing, you know, you are definitely infiltrating that new generation with such a love and proud of something that, hey, there's an ownership over there. So ownership, well, that's what I was. So you own that information. That's a memory that you own. Nobody can take away from you. So I think it's important to kind of allow us to kind of be seduced by that memory and that pride of like that kind of stories, and then how to get to the new generation. Well, working with the freshmen and the second year generation at Parsons. Parsons School of Design is a very international school. It's like, my classes are basically United Nations, okay? It's like we have Chinese from I don't know how many places from China, many places Japanese, one Argentinian, you know, Iceland, like that. Of course, I had my Chicanos, I have my Mexicans from Mexico, I have my Dominicans from Santo Domingo, and I have my Dominican Yorks. And I love it. But my problem always been is like how to make sure these students are going to be agents of change. And I do understand that not everybody is gonna be an agent of change in the same way. So I'm gonna have to make peace with that. But how to make sure they know their history is a hard thing because with so many students from so many different places. But at the end, we are people. And the moment we start infusing that need for them, if they want to vote, how to teach them how to identify the right leaders, to learn from the past. Please, if you're gonna vote Democrat or Republicans, please read about the history of the two parties that you have choices for. Read the history first, and then you see the changes, okay? And then you can talk to me about why I'm gonna go with this and why you're gonna go with that. So then, another thing that I have been doing is capitalizing on social media. Okay, yes, we can capitalize on it. I don't like the idea that we can just like, the computer is so cold, it's boring, yeah, it's true. But how can we make it ours, okay? Not the computer taking over. It's like, I'm gonna occupy the computer. And then I start talking about that, you know, like, how can you be, you know, instead of saying in Facebook, look, I am eating such a wonderful tacos. Why don't you make, hey, I am eating tacos here because this place has been in this neighborhood for I don't know how many years, belongs to the community of so and so and so, where the family came working class, and hey, we all immigrants, you see? So all that, it's been, you know, it is hard. I don't want to say that it's not hard, but it is for me very important to make my exhibitions, my classes, like completely interactive with the new generation. We have to occupy the new generation because it's the hope. Well,
Okay, I put something together. I'm going to read it quickly, but I think it's important. The artists and the activists, strategies and solutions. It is an honor to be able to address you this morning and to be in company of such distinguished artists and scholars on this panel. I will keeping my remarks brief to allow the time necessary to establish the dialogue among the panelists and our participating audience. I will divide my presentation by the following section: becoming an artist and activist, thinking outside the box, understanding the box, the system, what it is, getting acquainted with the players, elected officials, community leader, religious leader, educational institution, important non-for-profit organization, private sector as a pool of founders, transforming the issue from yours to theirs and subsequently to ours, establishing that our ownership of our issue is the foundation for victory. Artists and activists. An artist oftentimes wants to be in a quiet and secluded studio with no interruption, and enter that creative zone. Yet when we engage in any form of activism, we must physically move to the space that is chock full of conflict, competition, and disorganized idea with the individuals who want to not only change an environment, these individuals or collectives truly want to change the world and are frustrated because it is not happening fast enough. There is a place of urgency with a capital U. I have been privileged in having lived in my childhood and early adulthood in Puerto Rico. prominent artists, writers, and scholars. Yet my experience in New York that became my home after graduating from Academia San Carlos is the one that has solidified and enriched my life. I have wrinkles and battles to scars and scars to prove it. My involvement as an artist turned activism has led to the foundation of the following in front and behind the scene: El Museo del Barrio, Taller Boricua, Puerto Rican Traveling Theater, Loisaida Inc., now Loisaida Art Center, Clemente Soto Vélez Art Center, electoral campaign, including getting elected as a part of the State Democratic Committee, getting the Navy out of Vieques, the fight for marriage equality, and now getting all 50 states to address the issue of the debt crisis of Puerto Rico. My experience also includes my parents' involvement with schools. My youngest son attended and engaged elementary and middle school students and faculty in the creation of 2 murals that were created over 25 years ago that has to do with violence. The month of November, in which the Puerto Rican Heritage Month in New York City, I was invited by the Comité Noviembre, the organization in the group together, mostly Puerto Rican organizations, to celebrate our heritage. I chose to depict our first heritage, the Taino heritage. And by doing that, the chairperson of the Comité Noviembre publicly announced that I had challenged the organization to protect the Taino heritage and preserve sacred archaeological areas in the island of Puerto Rico. That was my secret agenda. It was a win-win for the collective without the need to meetings or community outreach struggle to defeat and heartaches. But it usually doesn't happen that way. Thinking outside the box, that's why artists are wanted, because the collective understand that while we may think and create outside the box, that doesn't mean that we know what the box is in. Understanding the box, you have formalized what the system is in order to affect change. That involves getting acquainted with the power players. Meet your elected official, make it your business to identify the community and religious leader and engage them in the issues of the collective. Approach the educational institution, including all levels, the not-for-profit organization and the private sector, who can become sponsor and a pool of funders, transforming the issue from yours to theirs, and subsequently it becomes ours, establishing that ownership, it is our issue, become the foundation for victory. Strategies and solutions, dealing with the obstacle of the collective. The word collective doesn't necessarily apply to some artists. I am making a controversial statement, but it's a true one. Some artists will seize an opportunity to be part of a collective, but it's with an individual agenda that is self-serving, a warning of wisdom that must be addressed. Effective team is easier said than done. We must leave the ego at the door, or better yet, leave it at home. We must be open to new concepts, example as an artist, traditional art form versus modern art form. If we want to bring about a change outside, we must embrace the change within.
So we have short presentations, and I'm really pleased with the presentations. I would like to invite the audience to have any comments or questions to our panelists, and maybe we can have some discussion or just some comments, whichever.
Well, I just want to thank everybody for showing up, but I think that the other thing is that this is the University of Texas, okay? Where is the art department? Where are all those people here? You are embraced at the university level, where we gave an award to George Preston Bush because he won the land commissioner's position because his daddy had all the money in the world to sustain that kind of thing. And the old people had to come and protest on his behalf, thanks to Marta Cortera. But the thing is that this is part of the process of the teaching. And I'm not a speed reader myself, but I was gonna ask you, if you put your presentation on the YouTube or whatever, so that everybody can see this and be reinforced by it, because the issue is that in the process, people do not have the time to go back and reassess this and think it thoroughly, because we're here being rushed on. And Naomi Klein was here the other day and did that presentation, and I'm sure that, you know, the time and energy that was given to that, you know, is much more when we are the ones that are being courted now, when our life is on the line now. And historically, part of the reason that this art is so rich is because it has always existed at that level. And it is a lifeline to the construction worker, the maid that cleans the beds at the Marriott, et cetera, to be able to come and, you know, have that sense of hope and aspiration. And so I look forward to this new wave for 2016, and the driver's license, like who did the driver's license when the Texas legislature was doing that, and Mario, was it Vasquez? That had a poster by Sam, wasn't it? That was trying to get the undocumented people the driver's license, and now they've taken that from them, and so we constantly have that treadmill, you know, where there's the appearance of, but in fact, under the table, the money went over here. And so historically, the stories aren't told, and the Jewish people, they spend $1 and it goes through their community 6 times before people go, no, go to the taqueria, because it's not the top of the line, but it's not Chipotle. It's not owned by the Silicon people. It's owned by that family that came, that is trying to feed their children, that is trying to, and so I was very happy, and I'm glad I got to make it. Because in a small nutshell, it hits all the points.
And I want to
Sí.
share something that happened in 1979, specifically here at the University of Texas. This was when we had the League of United Chicano Artists, Lucha, in East Austin. And we had a group called Mujeres Artistas de Sudoeste. Santa Paraza was on the
Santa,
board.
sí.
Silvia Orozco, Pedro Rodriguez, I'm sorry. And we decided that in order to move on in where we wanted to go in the direction, we needed to have intercambio entre Mexico y Estados Unidos. So being that Santa was a student here at UT and I was a student at St. Ed, even though I had attended here 2 years, we decided to put together una conferencia plástica chicana. And we brought in Raquel Tibol, we brought in Pedro Mayer, who had just finished coming from Nicaragua before. We brought in Adolfo Muchab, he had, matter of fact, he was a professor in UNAM, but before that, he was a student of Leopoldo Mendez, and he's still alive. You know, he did Libertad Expresión, that face with the cadena. We brought in 20 students from UNAM, and we brought in the top-notch Tejano artists from all over the U.S. You know, Patricia Rodriguez. We brought in Jesus Salvador Trevino, who did and then Susana Racho, who did the videos on Chicanos. And because we only had so much money, we housed them in private homes. Then we paid for their flights. And it was awesome because the University of Texas loaned us their art space. And I was a student at St. Ed's, and St. Ed's loaned us their art space. I still have the pamphlet with all the details of all the sessions that took place. We even have a teatro at the Pan American Recreation Center. We even had the Conjunto Aslan played at the Zaragoza Park. Can you imagine Chicanos and guys getting together? And it's good. We need the collaboration. That's very, very important. But then later on, I found out, you know, Raúl Valdez was doing the pláticas when they knocked down the Anti-Acuatislingas. Matter of fact, we started there when the Anti-Acuatislingas was still there with the IHOP is on IH-35 in South Spurs. And we started there, and I remember when he did a plática on when they destroyed the mural. I didn't even know that when he was a University of Texas student, he got an F. Yeah. And when I was talking to Marta Cortera about that, he said he wasn't the only one. There were other Chicano students that were taken there. So to me, I think that this is a beautiful thing that you folks are doing, because we need that oral history to be passed on. Matter of fact, I'm married to an artist, Jose Francisco Trevino, and I felt that the legacy needed to continue. So I started collaborating, and I put a show thanks to La Peña. La Peña supported me 100%. Between tres mujeres de Mexico and tres from here, Marcia Gomez, Santa Barraza, Liliana Wilson. Mexico, it was Monica Mayer, Leticia Ocharan, Cecilia Sanchez Duarte. It traveled to 5 cities. I mean, this is before we even had the back Mexican culture, before we had the Cali de Alameda todavía, you know. So it's important because right now we have a lot of Tejano artists, you know, and you know, 80, 70, and we need to make sure that we show their work, you know, in what we call our museums. So I think that this is very important, and I'm glad that it took place. So I want to thank you.
I just wanted to kind of reflect on the challenges of the traditional workshop production and how to circulate it in social media. And one of the things that we were talking about, Tomas and myself, was the issue of copyright. The issue of copyright and how do you circulate those images. My students, I'm trying to teach them that they have to have references and that they cannot steal images from the internet, and they have to give credit. But in practice, and probably if you are trying to engage young people to come to vote, what is going to happen, I can see it happening, and it should happen that way, is that they need to appropriate the image in order for them to recirculate it. So how do you resolve if you are using the traditional workshop and then you make those images available through the internet, through the YouTube, through all of those Facebook and Twitter, and I don't know, Instagram. I cannot keep up with it. But how can you do that and encourage and facilitate and let the people know that they can take it, make it theirs? And how is the artist going to respond to that? Because that's the other thing. Like you said,
Well,
no all artists.
Yeah, well, the thing is that when you have an image that an artist did, if you pass it on and you give credit to the artist, there's no problem with that. The problem is, like, especially in photography, that they use, and you'll get sued for that. You will definitely, once you get fat on the cow, and they'll come after you. So don't do that. And if you have students and you're dealing with the arts and whatever, you have enough creation in your mind to come up with something new. You know what I'm saying? So I always try to push, whenever I'm working or I'm doing it at the taller at the print shop, try to do your own image. Don't try to copy anybody. Do your own thing. Go take your own pictures. Go to.
Yeah, but I'm sorry, Nisa, but I was referring to Gilberto's proposal. Your idea of creating posters for engaging community to vote. And thinking about the other strategies besides just the traditional distribution of images in hard copy. So just for that.
So you could do, but legally you could also, if it's a group and we're going to do something, you create how do I say, like a fund or something where you say the artist, you give the release. If it's for this case and it's for not-for-profit, I give a release. You know what I mean? Because that's for going for that cause, and that's more money that's going to come in to continue. So there's different things that you can do. But the thing is that you cannot appropriate already an image and use it in something else or a photograph, because you're going to get sued. But talking about Gil's project and also involving Consejo Gráfico and all of that, that we will have to work it out. The images, the intellectual property right, whether Consejo Gráfico gets to just use it, or we create another not-for-profit that houses the money. You understand? I mean, you have to think about stuff like that.
Well, the idea is that there'd be original print edition. So these would be, original artwork that would be distributed between the artists, the art print studios, the project. Some of these prints will be designated for museums, so it'll be a permanent archive, if you will, and others will be available for benefactors who help out in supporting the project. But I would think that they would have to be released by the artist to allow the reproduction of the
Exactly,
posters.
exactly.
You know,
Exactly,
and there could be a tag on the
exactly.
poster, so there's something that designates as a poster.
I'd like to
Alright.
move another, these are all very central. I'd like to go back to to the notion of context, and the context of 2015 and 2016. And I think that artists have always been sort of like the first people to understand what is really going on and try to capture that in a visual or artistic form, whether it's in a dance or a poem or whatever. And the realization is, and for example, and you have searing images. I have a searing image in my mind of Time magazine, and it's a black nurse, and there's a white man in a machine, those machines, end of life machines, and she's holding up the plug, right? I'm talking about the fear as Latinos become, minority majority. The fact is that it's now seeping down, at least in the place where I live, San Antonio. That fact of San Antonio being a minority majority city has not really entered the consciousness either of the way the social order is or of our own selves and the power that we now have with its status in terms of creating things that articulate that notion. First of all, when I see, for example, in our panel, it's an example of, although all of us grew up with a particular group working with the arts, the change, of course, is now it's a Latino group. As Sherazad attempted, each group, we're very heterogeneous. Each group has particular ways of expressing and particular forms. Even though there's some, Juan Flores used to say, when we talk about comunidad, remember it's made out of two words, común and unidad. And if you struggle and struggle to find points of unity and común, that still doesn't mean that you're going to have unidad, And so the thing is that all the ways that we see ourselves, first of all, I'm proposing three words that I would like to just throw out. One is conocimiento. We still are a long way from knowing each other.
Yeah.
The Puerto Rican artists are a long way from knowing the Dominican artists. The Chicano artists, many of us are still a long way from knowing the Dominican and the Puerto Rican artists and the Cuban artists. And so, in other words, but underneath that is another notion. I was a member of the generation of the 60s, The things have shifted because now all of us are aware, no matter whatever nationality group you belong to, all of us are aware that this is the U.S. and that
That's right.
Latino art is American art.
Exactly.
And American art is Latino art. So
Uh-huh.
the shift in that, I think, is really important, that we are now no longer the periphery. The American experience now has to include us as a foundational part of that experience, including
right.
the visual arts.
Exactly. That's true.
The first artist expression, whatever our ideological things are with Spain and whatever, we have to recognize that those were the beginnings, as you saw in the poster, who is an illegal immigrant, right? Pilgrim, right? So, one thing is conocimiento. Todavía nos falta mucho para conocernos unos a los otros. And you'll find a lot of commonality, but also appreciating, maybe it's a unity in difference, which is a difference in trying to amalgamate all the Latinos in one way. How we can be unified, maintaining the history and the culture of each particular group. It's a very difficult task. But, and on top of that, to say this is American art, because what the main line has still continues to do in museums is that they articulate each group in terms of their mother culture, you know, to keep them away from dealing with us here, you know. A lot of the Chicano artists that do all these posters were going to art school and learning all about the American art movements and so on. You know, yes, Mexican is a foundational part, and it's still there, you know. But these are American artists, U.S. American artists,
Yeah.
and also American artists because they're continental artists. The U.S. is not a country, it's a continent. So, you know, America is a continent, not the U.S. only. Mexico is also a U.S., for example. So anyway, the first word I think is conocimiento. We still have a long way to
Yeah.
acknowledge that, and so voting rights or everything. The words, you know, it might be wonderful if we incorporate it. You know, I remember in New York when I was there, you know, pa'lante, pa'lante,
Sí, los
you know,
de young
pa'lante,
lords.
the young lords.
Yeah.
You
The
know,
young
well,
lords, yeah.
for us, that was a new, for me, it was a new word, no, pa'lante, because that was, but when a Chicano artist incorporates that word into an image, then he builds the unity
Exactly.
visually and in terms of the community. So the next word is confianza. I'm using words that are very powerful words within the Latino community, and particularly the Mexican community. You know, confianza, una persona que tiene confianza is somebody who's gone through something with you and you trust them. It's ultimate trust. Usually, una persona de confianza is somebody who's gone through human or, you know, things with you, and you trust them because you know they're with you. And so we have to build that confianza that all of us, whatever group, have, you know, the ganas and the thing, you know, the spirit to work together, because we've been through historically in this country, you know, from the very beginning, you know. And now as historians remind us, you know, at one time, all of this one time it was New York, it was Philadelphia, you know, it was New Mexico, you know, where people were arguing. The newspapers were very important to you know, we were reading in San Antonio, Texas, what was going on in Cuba, what was going on in the Dominican Republic, you know, in the community. So the community newspapers are another, even though we're high-tech, all these other venues are also simultaneously building confianza. And the last word is convivencia, you know, a word that comes from that period when Spain was trying to incorporate and use all, including the Muslims and Jewish people all together. And they build this convivencia, you know, of all these groups. So I think that the challenge is to use all of these words like conocimiento, keep working on it, confianza, you know, to have the confidence that we are now a majority presence and that our experience is a foundational experience to American art and convivencia, living together, because all of us, you know, are the power of us as Latinos. And so the voting, whether there's posters or whatever we do in terms of voting, getting the people out to vote, you know, it would be wonderful if the pamphlets were not only bilingual, you know, but that somehow in there we use words and vocabulary that address all the multiple groups, the precise ways in which, you know, Dominican Yorks or Nuyorican talk about these issues included, so that we're saying we're together, but we also, you know, cada cabeza es un mundo. Each world is, we want to preserve that. I'll stop there, but I just think that we are at that point of a tectonic shift, not only demographically, but intellectually and culturally, in which we are recognizing now that this is, and that is why you're having this pushback, particularly in coded words. You know, when in San Antonio we're asking, you know, for all kinds of activities to reconstruct streets, to reconstruct, you know, channels, they're using coded words. You know, they say, oh, well, architecturally or artistically, this is too this or too that. They're actually saying it's too Mexican. You know, we don't want that. And I'm just suggesting that there's a lot of coding words in which what they're really attempting now that they're feeling the powers that be are feeling this, we and artists, I think, are the ones that are articulating and taking out those words, like the Trump piñata. I mean, what a better people-oriented thing to put up that thing and to, you pay $5 and you get a chance to
Well,
break
you know,
it down.
already the system started, because I know it, when I'm looking at this, that it says diversity over here, and HUD, like in New York City, they're like in, especially in El Barrio, they want to, they're putting money, like they're giving like $125,000 through the Department of Cultural Affairs to create an alliance within the community of all the different arts organization, business, and stuff like that. And they want to get a manager, so that manager goes out and gets money for those groups. So what I'm saying is the system is already going in there to try to control the situation.
Always.
You know what I'm saying? But, and I see it because of the diversity thing, and because I've been going to the meetings over there to decide about who is going to be the host for that organization, for the money and this. And let me tell you, it's big fights among the groups, screaming at each other, you know, no, you got to do it this way, that way. Then you have the blacks, you have the Mexicans, you got the Puerto Ricans, you got the other ones that are gentrifying the area. So we're in a big mess, and they're doing it with the diversity or whatever. But what I was going to say was, with what Frausto was saying, that the artist is not only doing the artwork, because when you're out there, you look at things and you start capturing things that you want to use for your own work. I remember when I used to live in the Lower East Side, that with Loisaida Economic Development, that's a social services organization. Now it turns into the arts because of the new exhibit that they did with the John Lords and all of that. But the thing is, the way that we did it in the Lower East Side was, we created a group through Loisaida that was called a challenge for those who dare. And then we organized the community. So we will have meetings, like let's say every Wednesday at 7 o'clock. And we will bring people in and we will discuss the issues of the community. We will discuss, you know, things that other people, they will bring other people. Sometimes we didn't have a space where to hold the meetings. So then we will host the meeting in different people. I will say, okay, come to my house one day, you can have the meeting in my house. That was one way to get more close within the community with other members that live around the community. And we started creating strength during that time, because the Lower East Side, you got the Chinese in one side, you got the Polacks, you got the Jews, you got the Puerto Ricans,
Mexicanos.
and now you got Mexicanos also and all of that. So we have to go back to organizing within our communities and taking that challenge, you know what I'm saying? Because also you have especially Mexican, and even with the Puerto Ricans, we're because of the Johnson, we're Americans, but we're not Americans. We're second-class citizens in Puerto Rico. They go to Puerto Rico to get monies for the elections. You're in the world. You don't vote for the president if you're over there. But then your situation changes when you're over here in the States. That's why, and there's a lot of people moving back and all of that. So, and what you said it. The Puerto Rican, even with my father, he met my mother in Mexico. They had me, well, he was part of the VETCO. He made all those artists from Taller de Gráfica Popular. They brought it to Puerto Rico. Then from Puerto Rico, they went to Cuba, to Santo Domingo, and we're in the States now.
So she's referring to her father, Rafael Tufino, very famous Puerto Rican artist.
So what I'm saying is that somehow we have to make a bridge, and we have to start organizing within the community to get the power with the vote, get the power with the vote, and it's not only doing the poster and doing the artwork, using the art as an excuse to infiltrate and go in there and bring the people in. Otherwise, if we don't educate el pueblo and we don't tell them what is their rights, because the whole problem is fear. They don't know what their right is, they don't know what the organizations are, you know what I mean? So we're going nowhere. We have too many undocumented immigrants also that are afraid to speak out, that they're afraid, you know, that they point the finger at them. The children are afraid because they're undocumented and they have to go to school. You know what I
Yeah,
mean?
the
So we
documented
have to start, and then the people are that, but the thing is, you have to create, we have to organize. You know, and this is fierce, like with no fears, and it's gotta get done, and it's like yesterday,
So this,
because of the vote.
Okay, well, first of all, it's wonderful to see everybody here. I'm so happy to see you. I have a question about, upcoming artists. As you know, Austin is now probably the most expensive city to live in. A lot of what Dolores and Olivier haven't been here in a while. If you go to East Austin, it's not the same East Austin you all used to know when you all lived here. And so what I'm hearing the community, because I do run a community-based organization, it's very grassroots. What we hear is that artists are the ones turning Austin into, gentrifying Austin. Because what they hear is the street art come first. They open this new, artsy places, and then they have like little coffee houses, and then your property taxes go up, and you have to move out. And so if you see the majority of East Austin people, they have lived there, they have been pushed out into the outlying area of the county. So what suggestion do you give to upcoming artists, people that want to become artists and speak about this issue of gentrification within the fact that it's so gentrified already? I don't know if that makes sense.
yeah, I don't know if there's a simple
What-
solution. You've got
That happened in New York City.
That's what
Yeah.
happens.
Okay,
in
You
the-
have
you-
two things going on there. Is that on one
Happens
end,
everywhere.
you've got a population that's been there for a long time, and you've got a group of people who, that's all they could afford in terms of being there or not doing anything. So I don't know if there's a simple solution.
Yeah, but the developers use the artists, and the artists are supposed
that's
to
a
be the
different thing.
visionaries.
That's a
And so
different
it was too scary to go in there, but let's get the artists in there and give them a
Make it
cheap
pretty,
raise.
make it
And when I'm
nice.
ready to come back to that neighborhood, then I'm
gonna be
gonna
so cheap.
going up the rates. And now we have a collaboration organization called Creative Arts Alliance, right? So they had their event Monday. So they gave an award to Mechicarte, they gave an award to Lara Esparza, and they gave an award to Billy Harden, a black organization, a theater group. Why? Because this is their third year. And so when we mustered the numbers and said, we are a bigger number, you should give us more money, but we didn't have the lawyers nor the accountants. Now they've created this organization, and this organization, guess what? Has got the computer app, and you have to go put your event on their computer app, and they do it for the city, and they do all kinds of other things.
And it's
so that we
happening
can-
not only here, everywhere in the United States is happening that.
See, and they're adapting that, and then using it for us and say, look, I even have these people of color in my organization, and we
yeah,
have
but
these
that's-
little roundtable discussions, and so now legitimize me, I'm the lobbyist for them, because their central issue was, we're losing space, because it's too expensive. And so now we've all become people of color because we're losing space, and we don't have the.
But then that's why you have the city council.
That's what.
So you go to the, you see, those are the laws and those are the things that you have to organize people and tell them, you don't want them, yeah, okay, come in here. Yeah, artists, come in here and make my community better. But then I'm gonna put some laws in there that is not gonna allow those developers or those buildings that I'm gonna give to artists to either sell it, like if you're a nonprofit and you get a building for very cheap or whatever, and you fix it, there's gonna be many, many, many years before you're gonna take your profit back. You understand what I'm saying? So there are laws. You know, who are you? These are the things that you gotta go after. You know what I mean? Otherwise, you're nowhere.
The recurrent theme that we've been talking about is somebody mentioned the word, fright. I think it's stronger than that. They're terrified.
Yeah,
Yeah.
And it begins with already the reason that Ninfa was reading from this, I just passed it out because this is a new study that came from the DeVos Institute of Arts Management. It's called Diversity in the Arts, the Past, Present, and Future of Afro-American and Latino Museums, Dance Companies, and Theater Companies. In other words, all the arts. And what it is a draconian effort to say, in the 1960s, artists created all these organizations. Now, they're 30 or 40 or 50 years old. They're in their they're having all kinds of transition problems. because the founders are getting older, et cetera, et cetera. They have new groups. They're in trouble, folks. That's what this
Yeah.
article says. And what it says is, well, it's very easy. You know, let's get rid of all those organizations, all basically community arts organizations. And there are some of those organizations that have made it. And we're very proud of them. You know, things like, Ballet Hispanico that travels internationally, et cetera, they have budgets of over $1 million, et cetera. Why don't we, these are major foundations, this is Ford, Rockefeller, all the majors. You know, why don't we now only fund those organizations because the survival of the fittest?
Yeah.
Because they
And
are the
that one-
successful
and
ones.
the
And they're the
politicians, the
successful ones
politicians.
under the mainline terminology, and all the community organizations are sort of like now, this is, in other words, this is like the new 19, this response to that. And so anyway, if you're interested, I didn't make enough copies because it just could come through, but I'll put it over here and you can look at it, and if you are interested, you can get the report and also get the response from a lot of Latino community and black arts organizations called the Model for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. But it's only a part of the struggle because art is, the reason that this is important is we know how central artistic experience is to our communities.
Exactly.
But we're talking about art that is that art is the food that we eat, the language that we speak, the way we are. That is what art is all about. And art is just used that in some sort of, transform to some other form. And it's all, so all the questions, the political questions, and I'm all for the technology and all for all of that, and artists are using it in magnificent ways. When I was in New York, and that's what gives me a lot of courage to look at how the young people are actually reusing and using the technology. When I was in New York, they had a thing called video cartas, okay? Vamos a tener una quinceañera. My daughter's going to have a quinceañera. Pues la abuelita vive en Oaxaca. Okay, pues le vamos a hacer un video, abuelita. Es la práctica. So they send the video carta to the abuelita in Oaxaca. She looks at it and said, ay, mijitos, pero no, están muy mal. Mira, when she's walking down the aisle, no se va a la derecha, se va a la izquierda. And the chambelán is standing over here. And so the abuelita corrects the thing. She sends it back. They do another rehearsal. They correct what the abuelita said. And now they maintain the culture, right, through this technology.
Now
And-
they are Skyping in
and
the mass
Skyping,
everything.
right,
As
right,
it
yeah,
is
right.
happening.
Or face,
Oh,
yeah.
yeah.
Y luego, queremos el mole de la abuelita. Well, hice el mole para todos los invitados, and then they said they had a culture, what they call cultural couriers. In other words, it was like the remesas. But instead of economic remesas, these were cultural remesas. Because economic remesas only go one way. They send money from the U.S. to there. But cultural remesas go both ways. So the abuelita sent the mole through the and then it said, okay, vayan al aeropuerto, and they go up and pick the mole. And so now they have the abuelita mole. They have the tradition. And so they do, in New York City, a quinceañera that's traditional, and the food is maintained through technology. So, as you were mentioning, pero es que eso es la sabiduría del pueblo, de los artistas, ¿no?
It's like usar,
And
yeah.
so in terms of the housing, exactly the same thing. They're using the artists, and that's the next big question. All our barrios are the prime areas now for gentrification.
Exactly.
Because everybody comes, particularly in Texas, particularly in a place that is so rooted in tradition, they want this. And they don't know that when they do everything they do, that, whatever that they mean by that, meaning that our culture, goes somewhere else. Because they lose the authenticity in the culture, which is a living culture. And I'll make one more spiel, y ya me acabo. We are in San Antonio, and it's just an example of what's going on. In San Antonio, next year we'll celebrate, a couple of years from now, our 300th anniversary as the founding of the city. And we have just recently been named a UNESCO, World Heritage Site. Cuando yo una vez, hace unos pocos años, estuve en Madrid con muchos Latinos talking to the Españoles, because España is as interested in the whatever amount of billion-dollar market niche that we represent as everybody else in this country. You know, we all talked about how the publication industry and books, bilingual books for children, we all talk about all the economic things, the housing, all the things. And at the end of the table, at the end, we went around and each one had a parting word. And what I said was, ustedes, la crónica, la gran saga que ustedes los españoles empezaron, you know, hace 500 años, you know, you wrote the first chapters, the first discovery, you wrote the maps, you talked, you know, you wrote the first, but if you want to know the last chapter, which is how that story is, you have to talk to us because we're writing it. We are making it, you know. And so this power of rewriting the history, including the past, but say putting it in terms of actuality, I think is a big, you know, how we're writing that. And what they want, what they always do, like in San Antonio, yes, the missions are wonderful, yes, you know, they don't ever include the people that were there before the Españoles came, que son los indígenas, no?
Exacto.
And then the other thing is all in the preterite. We were fine when we're dead mummies.
Yes.
But when you are alive in your culture, then you're a problem. So we have to insist that all of these organizations, you know, all the festivities include something about the present. Tourists come to San Antonio to see the missions, but also they come to eat our food, to listen to our music, to understand a culture that makes us,
Exactly.
you know, American and has an added dimension, a rich new dimension to the new America. That's what the artists were talking about.
Yeah, the new America, but also, you know, I did that with Comité Noviembre. This is really crazy. We're celebrating the 19th, the discovery of Puerto Rico. Wait a second. We need to readdress that and really think really profoundly. What is it that we've been doing all these years and how are we going to change that around? Because that is not a good thing and psychic for the mind of the people. You know, right? We were not discovered, we were there. It was a genocide.
Yeah.
So, you know, these are rewriting the history again. But then you have the economic factor on the other side. Like, listen to what's happening in Puerto Rico. The hedge funds, you know, now they want the hedge fund and Puerto Rico has no money. And the government just finished giving tax abatement to people from outside to come and buy and do business and all that. I was in San Juan 2 weeks ago in el Colegio de Abogados because of the Marriage Act, you know, for gays, talking about that and how we accomplished that and that how many other things we need to do in order to help young people and the high rate of suicide and the religious factor and all of that. But what I want to say, I was in shock when I heard that some guy went there in a plane, he saw 10 buildings, without looking at them, he signed, he bought them, and he has them. And he's from outside of Puerto Rico. And this is in a tax abatement. So slowly, what you're looking at is that they are selling the island little by little. And here, you understand? But who's doing it? The people that voted for those people to get in there. You understand what I'm saying?
And they 10 years in advance, they dropped the
Well,
prices of everything. There's
But
no
you know,
industry,
knowledge.
and then
Now it's like están durmiendo. It's like a very unconscious kind of situation that's happening, because then all of a sudden you start realizing, I'm doing this, but wait a second, discover Colombo, get out of here. Look what they did in Mexico, Hernan Cortez and all of that, and look at all the stuff we're discovering. We're still opening up holes and finding stuff that the Indians left. You know what I mean? Why they kill everybody? You know what I mean?
You don't have
So,
access to cash to fix your own house.
and then people, you understand what I'm saying? So what do? It's not only the arts, because we're poor, we have no money, but what we have is manpower and the will that we must do something, and then also teach young people, come with me, I don't know, let's go see, I'll teach you how to organize. Let's have a meeting down the block, let's take so many, you understand what I'm saying? We're going to have to do that. There's no two ways that, you know, I'm already 66, but no, tú sabes, pa'lante. Tú sabes.
But I want to add something that goes with what you were saying. I think everything, the roots of everything is knowledge. And that's something we can get for free, you know, clearly. especially now that everything is open. You know, who is in charge of this? Because I want to go back to something that I did, and it goes completely in tune with what you were saying.
Ajá.
Can you...
Sigue. Ay.
No, sigue. Okay, hi there.
Uh-huh.
Okay, you see the first one, and it's like this big sculpture that is like a cathedral. I want to
The
tell you
one
exactly
before,
what this
the
piece
one
is
before.
about. Well, I basically created a
Esta,
soft
mira,
large...
aquí está.
Yeah, that one.
Ah,
yeah,
yeah,
but
okay.
that's
Uh-huh.
the view. Well,
Uh-huh.
it's a soft large-scale sculpture by stacking together inner tubes deep in gold paint, resembling a floating altar and evoking universal migration stories. So the inner tubes are attached together by electrical ties, those safety ties that the police in every country immigration use it. So there's a reason for that. The inner tubes are attached together by these safety ties, sometimes in distress, alluding to pain and suffering. The piece is poignant with airport suitcase IDs. Let's go to the second one then, so you can see what I'm talking about. Can we move to the next
The
one?
next one?
No.
No.
That one.
Uh-huh.
So basically, the piece is pointed now with airport suitcase ID tags in different colors. And if you take a look, this one that you can see, that one is red, another is yellow. And the image it has is enormous, JFK, which is the beginning of the promised land. And the Statue of Liberty, that is cinnamon color. So the cinnamon color of this, of the Statue of Liberty is about the result of the mixing of all colors. Therefore, the action of mixing is inclusive.
Mr.
And this
Sergey.
cinnamon color is no African American, it's nothing. It's like all of us. That
Exactly.
is the meaning of Americanness. And the moment I felt, like I said to you guys before, that it needs people. And how can I engage the people to understand these stories that come from the beginning of the story of our continent? I basically gave everybody those little suitcase tags, that printed from and to. And when I gave to the people in the Gallery of International, it's New York, everybody from everywhere. And it's like, oh, from I am American. I said, American? What's that? Are you a full-blooded American Indian? I said, no, okay, so your grandmother? Oh, Polish. And you? Mexican. And you? Well, my father is Puerto Rican, the other is Dominican. Oh, okay. So the moment everybody start telling their stories,
The moment
this
they're
a little printed, because I use printmaking with the idea that I want to defy the concept of printmaking. It's this idea that there is something that is in common. There is something in common, But then somehow we give it character. And then this character and difference are the beauty of it. So we have common, but we have different. And then if you make it a sancocho, it becomes delicious.
Yeah.
So this is how I feel. It's a way for our generation to understand the history, own it, and then start getting involved with, like, how can we get things done? In my opinion.
And also to recognize that the art goes beyond the intention of the artist.
Yeah, completely.
And one of the examples that I was explaining to Tomas in our way here was the Yosinapa reproduction of on all the events that have taken place all over the world, and particularly in Mexico, and the reproduction of the images of the 43 disappear and the 6 killed students. And in one of the huge marches that took place recently, I saw this image that I was just, it was so beautiful and it was so powerful. And the posters, they did the posters, graphic posters, and this woman decided to get a bunch of those posters with the different faces of these students, and she created sort of like a quinceañera dress, an incredible dress made out of all these faces. And she wore that, it was white the background and the black faces of the disappeared, and in her bosom las mangas amplias y la crinolina going all over the place,
Enormous.
and those faces. And as she was walking in the march, you could see the embodiment of the disappeared, the embodiment of the frustration, the embodiment of what I call el orfandad, which you don't have anybody to go to and say, what can we do, no? And it became sort of the second epidermis of this woman. And so when we think about going back to the point of the graphic arts, the art goes beyond what the intent of the artist does and the way that we think it should be used or is used or is shown. That's the other area of richness of the reproductive image that you can reprint. That it can go, it's just, yes, it's the graphics, but it's also part of the performance. So it is used in performance. It is part, like you mentioned, and you allude to, the language. And so there are multiple aspects of our own culture involved in the way community uses, abuses, destroys, recreates the idea of the artist. And I think that that's probably one of the richest aspects of projects engaging community to think about something.
To provoke thinking.
You know that in El Barrio, 116th Street, is all Mexican, right? All the restaurant, you know, it's really amazing. Amazing. If my mother would have been alive, she would have never believed it. Because when she lived there, she was the only Mexican.
Puro pozole.
Entonces, the neighbor used to call it, mira, Mexicana, Mexico, ven acá, Mexico, Mexico. And now it's like you go there. You know that they took a whole war, they took a lot that had a whole big wall, and they did a whole big mural with them in 116 and between third and second.
We're going to close the session now. I'm going to just take 1 minute to read just the final comments here. That our work that is created to directly reach disenfranchised publics often has a unique way of communicating to these viewers, especially work that utilizes graphic expression in both languages, Spanish and English, and that utilizes imagery that is meaningful to these viewing audiences. How does this happen? It raises consciousness to specific issues, contributes to increased participation in organizations and events that prioritize the importance of these issues. When these images get circulated, messaging gets to broader publics as a means of contributing to the larger efforts to sensitize the importance of these issues to broader publics, so not specific to Latinos anymore, but to a broader arenas and organizations and leaders, especially those that are directly involved in shaping agendas in the political arena. So there's a lot of people who are trying to get the Latino issue in the more, as a primary focus in the political agenda, and it's hard for them. So a multiplicity of ways to get this issues raised. Incorporate these images in political mobilization efforts to get out the vote, generally speaking, but specifically in areas of the community where it has been hard to affect voter registration and turnout. Incorporate these images to sensitize voters and the general public of the connections of these issues to the national interest in the future of this country. And that's why we're proposing this massive national poster campaign, working with artists, working with art studios, and really working with community-based organizations to get these images and these posters and these ideas, ways of communicating to publics that are, again, hard to reach. So I want to thank our panel for wonderful presentation.